Greetings guitar players, welcome to this video. My name's Jack Jennings. Last week I was talking about my musical background building up to becoming a disciple of Roopa Panesar, who's a wonderful sitar player in the UK. So I was talking a lot about what really led me to, really seek a guru who could help me, and all of the different things that were building up and the reasons why it became imperative really in my musical development and in my career to find someone who could really help me to push things forward and put things into context. I'd been doing all kinds of different things with the guitar, but really needed that guidance. So this week I'm going to talk more about Shakir Khan, who's another sitar player who I'm also incredibly lucky to be able to say he's also my guru. So he's the son of Shahid Parvez, and Shahid Parvez, if you haven't heard of him, is one of the most renowned and respected sitar players in the world, who's alive today, alive and well, and still playing incredibly well. And his son Shakir Khan is just carrying on this amazing style of sitar playing, and he talks about a lot of his patterns being, like he likes to call them, modern patterns. He's got this approach where he's stretching things out and seeing what he can bring to it, but he's so rooted in the style that his father has developed that he's just an incredible musician that's really bringing that tradition forward and keeping the flame burning so brightly. They're really known for the rhythmic sophistication, the way that they look at tihais, that they're so good at playing in uneven cycles, like cycles of 7 or cycles of 10, which are quite difficult cycles just to get going, just to get your bearings and feel free in these different cycles. But they do all kinds of amazing rhythmic things in these odd cycles that, to be honest, a lot of musicians struggle to do them in just the regular, the even cycles like tintal 16-beat cycles. So they're really known for that rhythmic sophistication, but also just the pure virtuosity, the very fast players, and with a lot of stamina, and just do everything and make everything look very easy and very graceful. And the really important thing is that the way they approach all the different nuances of the sitar and that vocal quality, that is incredibly refined and done to such a beautiful, it's just done in such a mastery, with such mastery, such a delicate touch that they have, and they always seem to have a really firm grasp over, they know exactly what they're doing. Shakir Khan and Shahid Parvez, there's a sense that, when you're watching it, you get this feeling of, hey guys, don't worry, I've got this, just sit back and relax. And they're just doing it with a smile on their face, and they just seem to be in complete control of where they're going. To give you an example of some of the things that Shakir was teaching me and the simple mathematical principles that are underneath them, I thought I would just explain this particular pattern which went into a wonderful composition in Bageshree. It's very similar to a concept I've heard Carnatic musicians talk about. It's the same concept really, of having a phrase that can become gradually shorter or gradually longer. So this one becomes gradually shorter. So that's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then you can play it with one note less, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then with another note less, so you get 1, 2, 3, and then just 1, 2. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And it could be, you know, the other way around. It could be 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And there's different ways that you can play around with that. It's a rhythmic idea, but there's a very logical just approach to the numbers. But it sounds very musical, and you can hear how the phrase is just expanding. It's really such a simple thing, but it can be interesting what is done with it when it's put into context and how it's matched up with the structure of a composition. So there's a pattern like this that I used on a recent recital I did for Shakir. That was the one I did for the Guru Purnima celebration. So if I just play it to you with a metronome in the background, then you can see how it fits over the beat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. But then what happens is that we start using the mukra phrase of the composition, which is so the important part that we look out for is this. Okay. So what happens with that pattern is we go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And that third one lands on the beat. So I was doing a gap of 2, so there's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2 composition. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2. And then that lands on the first beat of a 16-beat cycle. So you can hear that being played with the tabla to give it a bit more context. So in a sense it's a mathematical rhythmic idea, but when you just listen to it, it just sounds very pleasant. It's just a nice musical phrase, and the way that the rhythm plays around kind of sounds a little bit, there's a bit of rhythmic tension, especially as it builds up. It gets gradually closer, so the first repeat of lands in a certain place, and then the next one lands a little bit closer to the beat, a little bit closer to beat 1, but it's a little bit early, so that one feels a little bit uneven, it feels a bit strange, and then the last time that you hear it, it just falls right back into place. So it's got that sense of rhythmic dissonance, a bit like how we would think of a chord change. In Western music we have a chord, and then you hear another chord that makes you want to go back to the first chord. So it's a bit like that harmonic dissonance, but it's rhythmic dissonance. So it's interesting, when you listen to it, it doesn't actually sound like it's anything that complicated in a way, it kind of just breezes over you. But when you break it down, it's got these mathematical principles, and in a sense they are quite simple and logical, but they're not that easy to play. It takes a while just to get the right feel and to be able to keep that pattern, stay true to that pattern, even though it's shifting over the beat, and it can easily feel like you've lost the beat where you're supposed to be, because you have to keep that independence while the tabla is holding that 16-beat cycle. But if you keep your bearings and stay true to the pattern, then you will land on the first beat. So that's part of the magic of these rhythms, and it's such a big part of this style of sitar playing. So it's been incredible to study with someone who's from that kind of background and has been taught, since the age of 3. Being in that environment, growing up with perhaps, undoubtedly one of the best sitar players in the world, is just there as your father, and you're just, from day one, you're getting all of this sort of input. So I was introduced to him through Roopa, because Roopa Panesar has also studied with Shahid Parvez, and she knew that I was really interested in his style, and I was often asking questions about how Shahid Parvez would approach things and about the experiences that she's had studying with him. He even modelled his sitar, and he got a sitar built especially for Roopa, and he went along when it was being built at the different stages, and he played the sitar and made sure that it was coming along in the right way. So he really modelled a sitar specifically for Roopa. So her sound, a big part of her sound, I think, must be thanks to Shahid Parvez and the inspiration, but also the instrument that he put in her hands. So she introduced me to Shakir when Shakir was visiting the UK in 2019 on a tour, and I went up to Roopa's guru's house, up to Dharanbir Singh's house, which was a real honour just to be received in that house, because he's such an incredible teacher, incredible musician. So Shakir was there, and we had a 2-hour long lesson, and he was just, showing me all these different patterns, all of these different things. I'd never learned anything as complicated as that before. All of these different tihai patterns where you repeat a pattern 3 times. People know simple tihais like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. You repeat a phrase 3 times so it lands on the first beat. So I was playing tihais like this, kind of simple ones. And then he started showing me these patterns that were incredibly long, that had huge extended phrases, and they had, or they would have different rhythms that would sort of change over the course of the pattern. So it would be like a theming variations, and they were so long and so complex, and they would always come back perfectly on to the first beat, even if it had taken several cycles to get back. That I started to wonder, how do you even come up with this stuff? How do you compose something? How do you start playing a pattern and know that it's going to land in the right place? You'd almost think that you'd have to kind of work backwards and add things on in reverse order to always know that you are coming back to the right place. The way I like to think of it is, imagine that you're throwing a ball, and you can kind of start to get good at maybe guessing, I can throw a ball like this and I know it's going to land on the other side of the room. And then what about if you're maybe a professional football player? Maybe you can kick a ball and you can judge that it's going to go 40 yards or 50 yards or 60 yards. So the way I think about these tihais, these different patterns that he's playing, is that he can sort of cast his rhythmic perception, if you like, so far into the future that he can start a pattern, and naturally he can judge what pattern he's going to play, and then he can kind of adjust it properly as he's doing it, knowing intrinsically how it's going to land on the first beat. So these aren't necessarily things that are all worked out before, and the mathematics are worked out, before playing them. They're things that these guys can improvise these things, and that they can change them, and they can do variations, and they can add different sections onto it. They've got the ability also to play these different patterns, but then put them in a different timing cycle. And even if they have to start it on a different beat, or the whole calculation is different, because now it's a cycle of 7 rather than a cycle of 16. They can do that. They don't have to practice that necessarily. I've heard stories from Manish Pingle, who's a wonderful slide guitar player that I've worked with, who also studied with Shahid Parvez. It so turns out that all the musicians that I'm working with closely are directly connected to Shahid Parvez. It's strange how it's come out like that, but it feels perfect to me, because he's really my favourite sitar player. So Manish was working with Shahid Parvez, he was studying with him, and the students were saying things like, "Oh, Shahid, can you play this? Guruji, can you play this tihai? Can you do it in 12? Can you do it in 7? Can you do it in 10? And Shahid Parvez was just there, just nailing it one after another. Oh, playing this cycle, no problem. This cycle, no problem. He could just do the pattern in any cycle. You know, he didn't have to think about it much before. He could probably just start and then just judge and kind of feel the timing. So when you break these things down, they can be very mathematical, but the way that they internalize that and then perform it is much more an embodied sense of that they can judge how the rhythm's going to pan out. And Roopa said that in her time studying with Shahid Parvez, things weren't really broken down and explained that much. The musicians in that circle were so just entrenched in that style that they could be learning new patterns, learning new things, and they just understood the language, they understood the logic underneath these things. So things didn't need to be broken down. You know, he would say, right, okay, here's one pattern, let's try this, now you try it, and the musicians would kind of pick it up just through this osmosis. So it's an incredible process. I've carried on learning with Shakir through online lessons, and every time I sit down, it's like going through, you know, what people would say a Frank Zappa audition would be like, when you sit down and they say, right, okay, play this. Okay, that's fine, now play this, now play this, now play this, and it keeps getting more and more complicated, and it's a really amazing challenge, but it almost feels like you're playing a video game or something when you get the first level and then they're like, okay, next level, next level, next level, and you're kind of progressing through, and it's always getting a little bit more difficult. So it's been an incredible journey, and I'm just beginning. There's just so much that I don't know, and often in the lessons I kind of feel quite slow and quite like I'm being quite silly. You know, I always feel like I should be able to pick up things quickly to help, you know, just to, not so much to impress Shakir or impress the teacher, but just to be able to keep up and keep that musical flow going and just have a kind of smooth learning process. So Shakir is really wonderful at breaking things down for me, but gradually the process of learning becomes sort of smoother, and the subjects start to become a little bit more familiar, and then they start to influence the way that you play, because I'm now starting to find that when I improvise, I more naturally do these different Tihai rhythm patterns, not the complex ones, just the simple ones. The simpler ones, they start to just feel more natural, like they're just part of your musical personality, and as you're playing, it's like you're doing a jigsaw puzzle, and you're playing, and then you get a sense of a space. Alright, I can feel I've got this space, and then you suddenly find yourself playing a pattern that fits into that space that then takes you back to the first beat. So you get so used to thinking about things in, you know, groups of three, that sometimes you just play a phrase and you suddenly go, oh, I can feel that if I do this 2 more times I'll land on the first beat, or I can feel that if I leave a bit of a gap and then play the second part, leave in the same gap and then play the third part, then I'll land in the right place. So you start to build up this kind of judgment, or at least that's how it appears to me. And because I asked Shakir, I say, well, how do you come up with these things, you know? And he never really gives me much of a straight answer. I think, from what I can gather, I think it's just this process of you develop that musical perception, you develop your rhythmic sense to such a degree that, like I said earlier, you can kind of cast it into the future. You can kind of think quite far ahead, and so sometimes you can just memorize patterns and you can just play them and say, right, I know I'm going to start this pattern on the third beat and I know that will land in the right place. But a lot of the time when Shakir, when Shahid Parvez, when they're doing these things in a concert, they'll be making changes, they'll be mixing them up. So they'll have these kind of formulas, but they'll know different ways to kind of keep changing them or just varying them to match the mood or match the different Raag that they're in will also need different treatment. Or like I said earlier, they might be doing it in a different cycle. So a lot of these things are very thought out and worked on, but it seems to, in the end, grant them an incredible freedom to do all kinds of different things and do incredibly complex things, but with that sense of freshness. And you can see the expression on their face that they're playing with it. They're seeing, oh, how am I going to do it today? You know, there's a freshness to it, which is so wonderful to watch. So I would really recommend looking at Shahid Parvez and Shakir Khan and listening to their music, and Roopa as well. She's got a different kind of feel to her playing because she's so inspired by Valaya Khan. So she's got a different kind of feel. The way that I almost like to think of it is that with Roopa Panesar, it's almost like a sort of like an ocean, like rolling wave sort of coming at you that kind of slowly engulfs you. Whereas with Shakir Khan, it can be more like a bolt of lightning. You know, he's got this kind of spark, he's got this fire, and he's got this, you know, profound complexity. Of course, Roopa has those ingredients as well, but she's got more of an oceanic sort of quality to her playing. It's a different feel, different personalities. But what I'm finding is that having these two both as gurus is just incredible, because there's that balance. I can see one of them is, you know, Roopa helps me to think in quite an open-ended way. So the process of the lessons is very open-ended. She'll say, right, here's a different concept, try playing with this rhythm pattern, or try playing with this kind of ornamentation, or here's a way of, you know, expanding and contracting phrases, creating that variation. But it's all very open-ended. Whereas with Shakir, he'll say, right, here is a perfect pattern that you can play from beginning to end, and it will have all of these, like, you know, these high points and low points, and it's more like a pre-packaged thing. So when I can try to integrate both of these together into my own playing, I know that I'm going to have a really, hopefully, I'm building towards the right kind of balance. So it's really my job to assimilate the information I'm getting from both teachers. And essentially they're both leading towards the same thing. It's that improvisation in the moment, and, you know, bringing out the character of the Raag and having a real strong sense of rhythm and melodicism together. But it's just interesting how the different teaching styles seem to be really complementing each other. And they're both, you know, they consider each other like brother and sister, so that I feel almost like I've got these two sort of like parental figures in my musical life. So I'm just incredibly grateful, saying this directly to Shakir and Roopa, if you're watching, I'm just incredibly grateful to learn from you and to have musicians like you in my life. And I'll be saying thank you for the rest of my life. I'll never stop saying thank you, because I just can't believe how lucky I am. So thanks everyone for watching. I hope this has been interesting, and I'll see you on another video. Bye.